You've written actually an interesting post. You talk about the trust element in there. You gave it a bit of a spin that was interesting, because it's not just about, do I trust you as a organization, but you made the link.
See, the perspective is, as we move into a very commercialized place, let's put it that way, everything becomes contractual, everything becomes a transaction. It is not just a transaction. It is something that I'm doing as an accountable person, regardless of your position. If you have ambiguity in your accountability, how do you deliver that level of trust between two parties? If everything has to go by the black and white, how are we expected to deliver that relationship?
So for you personally, what does it mean to have a green mind?
We need to be sensitive of how we utilize this place. If we are not careful in the way we are dealing with things today, we will pay the price for it later on.
I'm starting actually, I think, with one of the most, I would say, challenging questions.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get facilities management at the center of the discussion, especially when you're managing large portfolios, even whether it's in different projects or from an asset management perspective? Do you believe FM is actually at the moment at the center of the discussion or not?
FM has always been the center of discussion, because FM has ideally been considered as a cost center. So when people like us go back to the leadership team, if you're an asset manager, if you're a property manager, if you are a community manager, the first discussion happens on how much is the spend to maintain the property. And that's always been a discussion point where generally there's definitely an argument, or let's say a pushback that happens. Oh, why are we spending that much?
Mm.
And as we move across, UAE being a matured market, we can see the shift in the market at this point in time, where people have started thinking a bit more than a cost center.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there, but it's changing in terms of understanding from a risk perspective, looking at it from a value perspective, that how does an asset over a period of time add value? And especially such a market where things are going really high. The rents are increasing, be it a commercial space, be it a residential space. And the expectation of the end user, the customer, is increasing. Mm-hmm. You can see that trend in the last 10 years. What's the expectation of the customer? Earlier, people were happy with very small lobbies. Today, everybody wants a beautiful, large, a 5-star hotel-like lobby in their residential or their commercial units. So that's becoming a norm. So yes, to answer your question, yes, facilities management is become an integral part of the discussion, because people have understood the realization is kicking in, because FM is not just cleaning or MEP or security. It's much more. It's again the entire built environment. So health and safety is part of it. As the regulations are improving, compliance becomes a major part of facilities management. So if you're not compliant, you get a hefty fine, and things have changed so much that if you're not following your compliances, you end up paying a hefty amount as penalties. No property owner wants to do that. No. So the more professional you get, FM becomes an integral part of your operations. And again, more interesting part is people have started looking at beyond the regular building operations, and from a life cycle perspective. So there's a lot of, especially after COP28, and we're talking about from a sustainability perspective, we're talking about ESG perspective, and all these are adding values. Earlier, people, before this, we started this session, we were discussing out how podcasts have changed
Yeah.
to be a more visual perspective. So data, I mean, earlier people didn't see, what was the reality. Today, with the latest technologies, with dashboards and with systems like CAFM, and people have understood what is, and obviously AI coming into the picture, you can actually see where you are currently and where you are going.
Green Minds is where industry leaders and innovators talk about what's next in sustainability. Sorry to interrupt the show, but if you want to know more about sustainability, make sure you hit subscribe. Do you believe that a lot of large asset managers, companies, make sufficiently use of visualizing basically all that data, all that knowledge that we can have pertaining to our assets, or is there still a way to go?
It's a growing market. So if you look at it, there are mature companies who are using this data very wisely. They are, again, with lots of certifications and lots of compliance measures that they need to adopt. For example, let's say data centers. And if you're going to have an uptime audit, you have to comply to all these checkboxes, otherwise you don't get certified. So these are mature organizations who are very focused and invested on collecting this data, at the same time using this data to forecast of what's really going to happen in the next couple of years and how they're going to manage their property. But there's definitely another layer of organizations who are working towards it. And there's definitely another layer, the third layer, which is still, people like us are still trying to convince them that it's important. And if you do not change, or if you do not bring that thinking process, then you might be in trouble in the next coming years, because the technology is moving fast, the world is moving fast, expectations of the customer is increasing. Nobody wants, the day old, nobody's ready to live the life that we had 10 years ago. Everybody wants technology in their lives. The best way is today look at the cars that's being flooded into the market. You are paying less price compared to some European counterparts, and the amount of tech that is available within these new cars are amazing. And even though, if you look at the human tendency is, if I've got a reliability, if I've used, somebody else has used it for 10 years, 15 years, it's a reputed or tried technology, then I would use it. Right. But today the market trend has changed. A car which has come into the market 6 months ago, people have gone and purchased it. They are buying it by the bulk. So there is definitely a trend that's changing. And so all these three sets of organizations, which we mentioned earlier, in terms of who are already practicing it, they are, kind of showcasing in the market that what they have achieved in terms of savings, in terms of risk management, in terms of their optimization and how the business is operating sustainably. And with the force of ESG coming into the limelight in the next couple of years, I think so people will be forced to understand, gather data and understand them.
Well, you see also, obviously, slowly but steadily, some of these things already becoming more and more on the forefront. The land department working on the indexes, buildings are benchmarked, basically. Rent can be indexed as a result of it in certain areas and all that. What I always wonder is that there is so much development going on in terms of technology, and as a result of that, and by the way, not only hard technology as in AI or IT-related elements, software, but also in terms of the type of cleaning materials that you can use, moving away from conventional chemicals to more sophisticated biotech, if you like, enzymatic or probiotic or stuff like that. How do you see facility management companies actually keeping track with all of those developments in all those areas and making sure that their organization actually takes the wise decisions where to focus on and where to invest in?
Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting question. If sometimes I ponder that how many FM organizations in the region does have an R&D department, right? Unless you do, because every other industry, if you look at a manufacturing industry, if you look at tech industry, if you look at various other industries, does have an R&D department. They try it, they test it, they see if it works, if it practically works, commercially it is viable, and they bring it out into execution. They have a strategic plan. So that's something, in my opinion, needs to be developed with my counterparts in the FM world, especially from the service provider side. At the same time, the clients also need to support those aspects, because if the tender documents from my client is just saying that clean, he needs a XYZ, but he's going to beat on the price. So naturally, any leader in the FM space would think that, okay, fine. I mean, if I'm going to invest more money in R&D, and if I'm going to invest more money in buying those new products, unless it is bulk, the price doesn't drop. So I would rather go in with the tried and tested, more economical versions of chemicals. Now, if he has to have a change, first is what you had said. I mean, the awareness and the learning has to be there. So it has to be tried and tested by somebody, and they should trust in that sort of solution. Second is the client side, which is the property owner or the property, the landlord or property manager. They have to drive that from their end, that this is the product that they need. And there are very few clients who does that in this market at the moment. They're very sensitive to what chemicals are being used in your facility, be it for cleaning, be it for MEP or any other purposes. They're very specific and they're very careful in terms of what product that you're using. So it needs to be certified. There's authority approvals. This has to be so and so forth. So now, is it applicable to all the facilities across the nation? No. I mean, it would drive the cost of operation very high. But if we are able to earmark those premium projects where these sort of aspects could be practiced, and as the quantity and the volume increases, the prices also will stabilize. So,
and I think it is obviously, we are in a unique time, I would say, where the technological developments are of such that you can much better identify the risk areas. You can much better identify when something is probably suboptimal in running or even breaks at some point, predict. It gives you the input basically to start reviewing your standard operating procedures and how to redesign those in such a way that you get more efficiencies out of that in your operations, your building operations at the end of the day. Because bottom line is very simple. You still have to maintain your assets in order to get the lifespan out of it that you want at the right parameters, I guess.
True.
When you look at, and you've been in this market for a long time, so you've seen actually everything from its nascency 20 years back to where we're at now. When you look at the overall trends, where do you believe the biggest challenge lies for service providers to make that shift, to become more efficient, to really have a high quality output?
It's driven from both sides. I would always say that. If the market, I mean, today, best example, I mean, what drives the property prices up, right? When something happens in that particular area, when the entire market goes up, when the entire city gains popularity, when there's more demand of the same product, things goes up. In a similar manner, if the demand of quality facilities management goes up, that they're very specific, that they need quality, not just quantity or just price driven, naturally the service providers will have the opportunity to scale them up. Otherwise, people think that why should I invest money? I mean, if I'm not really sure if I'm going to, kind of make it, because you are in a very competitive space.
Yeah.
You are competing with huge amounts of companies, because again, this is a market where there is need and there's huge amount of companies who are performing the same services. So demand will help create that sort of importance within the service providers to bring.
Where do you see the biggest demand at the moment? When you look at just an average sort of like client, is the demand reducing energy, or the demand is upscaling basically the quality, the output, the way the building is maintained, asset life? Where do you believe the biggest demand lies at the moment?
I think so. It's a package depending on the customer. Some customers have been very specific in terms of energy conservation when it comes to water conservation. Very, very specific. Got waste management. They're very concerned because they have got reports to build. Some of them are concerned on the chemicals that is being used. Some of them are concerned with the sort of manpower and the skill set they have, and how they represent themselves, how they provide services to their end users, because that makes a big difference. So if you need a 5-star hospitality or a 5-star service, you need to put all these aspects together, because end of the day, you have two factors. You have operations, which is, let's say, thinking from a property manager's and asset owner's perspective. He's got a property and he needs to increase the value. So in a locality, there are 10 buildings. And if one building is being able to display extremely good beneficial characteristics in terms of its cleaning, in terms of its upscaling, in terms of its lobby, in terms of every minor details that goes into that property, and at the same time, he's able to optimize the costs and make sure that we are only spending the right amount of money. And that makes it impressive to his owner and impressive to the customer or the guest who comes into that property. So that's where, things will drive. And if that clarity is being able, if, for example, the client is able to drive that clarity back into a service provider and select the right set of service provider, and the service provider is able to understand what the client's pain area is, address that pain area, you are necessarily giving the right amount of services. But the challenge is today, since we are fast-paced, the documents sometimes may not be, the RFPs that we might get may not be up to that level of clarity. So you are doing a guesswork. And then you go into a typical competition in terms of commercial values, which later on puts in a lot of load back into the service provider to optimize, because the market is changing, there's inflation.
But it's an interesting sort of like almost paradox, right? Because speaking to many FM service providers here in the region, not just here in the UAE, but also beyond, we all see the same thing. We all see this dilemma that we have to upskill, uplift our outputs. We have ideas, And for some reason, it is always ending up in bids in still the price being the most important deciding factor from a procurement perspective. How do we break that?
Again, it's companies building strategies from a long-term perspective is important, because I've continuously seen the short cycling or the short-term thinking that happens that, okay, fine, I'm just worried about this year. I'm just worried about the budget for next year.
Yeah.
And as long as you are an asset manager, as long as you are a property owner, you should be thinking from a long-term perspective that how do I increase the valuation of my asset? The market's booming, the market's going up, and the only way I can still showcase that my properties are performing the best after 10 years or 15 years down the line is to ensure that you have looked at it from a long term.
Yeah.
And if you have that long-term strategy, then you can obviously work on, because I would always look at two things. One is obviously a long-term strategy. At the same time, you have short-term strategies too, because you need to meet the need of the hour.
Yeah.
So what are you ready to compromise and what are you not ready to compromise? So this clarity needs to be driven. In majority of the times, I mean, there's lack of clarity, in which is something that is non-compromisable, or you are ready to come. So if you are able to drive clarity into that decision making from a client side or as a property owner, that makes a big difference, because the service providers will open up new licenses and new companies every other day. So there are going to be people who's ready to go beyond the norms to get the job. So not realizing that what trouble they're actually getting into, which they realize probably after 2 years or 3 years.
Yeah.
So that's something that needs to be worked on, because unless you are a company with certain standards, or you are grown into having a proper governance and doing things systematically, you will still do a lot of errors in terms of pricing. So it's, again, it cannot be done just with one party. I mean, if the FM guy says, I'm going to give you that level of service, he's going to price at that amount, because he's not going to recover the money otherwise. Nobody, as we say, there's no free lunch. Typically that needs to be looked at. So once these two parties are aligned, and if there's a clear alignment, there's never 100% clear alignment. But as long as they're aligned well and they understand the service level agreements, and they are able to agree mutually on the KPIs, not one side driven, but on a mutual agreement, saying that that's practically possible and that's not practically possible. Yes, I can give you, shiny floors every 2 days, but that's going to cost you X amount of money. But the service provider should be able to do a sort of a consultancy approach as well, saying that, boss, listen, probably, yes, you've spec'd it, but may not be required. It's an overkill, right? I'm ready to price if you're ready to pay. Yeah. So that's sort of a transparent, open communication. Driving clarity should be involved in these sort of decision makings for larger. I mean, I'm not talking about for smaller projects or very small entities. You need one cleaner, two. Really, I mean, that time may not make real value. It may not add real value.
No, but I think you're right. By the way, here in the region, you have actually, with a lot of mega projects as such, in any case, or communities and the master developers in particular, you do have a lot of opportunity to have a massive impact. As a service provider or a group of service providers, by the way, because not everybody is doing just one thing. When you look at this and translate that basically into the organization, the facility provider organization itself, and you've written actually an interesting little post this week on LinkedIn, and you talk about the trust element in there, which caught my eye, because I think you gave it a bit of a spin that was interesting, because it's not just about, do I trust you as a organization, but you made the link further. Can you expand a little bit on that? Because that was actually interesting.
See, the perspective is, as we move into a very commercialized, place, let's put it that way, everything becomes contractual. Everything becomes a transaction. And if you are supposed to deliver, if for example, if the customer expects that I have invested X amount of millions into this property and I need to get that personalized approach, only having transactions, a transactional relationship may not help. You need the person who's investing, or the person staying there, the person doing his 10 to 12 hours of day-to-day routine in that project. He needs to feel invested. He needs to feel, regardless it's the owner, customer, end user, tenant, the cleaner, the security guard, the MEP technician, he needs to feel invested. He needs to feel it is not just a transaction. It is something that I'm doing as an accountable person, regardless of your position. If you have ambiguity in your accountability, how do you deliver that level of trust between two parties? If everything has to go by the black and white, and if everything has to go by somebody has written who probably is no longer within that community, right? How are you able or how are you expected to deliver that relationship, to have that to and fro relationship, that okay, fine, I can trust this person? Because see, UAE is rated as one of the safest countries in the world, right? So, and what does, for my logic, that is basically helping me to trust another person, helping me to trust my neighbor, helping me to trust the technician or the supervisor who comes into my house. So that level of trust, the government is able to drive and saying that, yes, this is the safest country. And that's by proper governance, that is by proper structuring, that is by proper establishing the rules and regulations. In similar manner, if we are to drive that between the client and the service provider, because no longer, say, going back to the article, it's earlier it used to be cases of, let's say you have 100 mid-income housing or colonies, and then you have 2 or 3 luxury, let's say 4 luxury housing, and then you have 1 ultra luxury housing, right? But look at the market now. How many super ultra luxury dwellings do we have in the market? Right? And why? What does bring those people to this place? Right? And if they are coming to this place, what do they expect? Right? So the line between a super luxury boutique hotel, a 5-star or a 7-star hotel, and an ultra luxury property has become very thin. Earlier, the difference was huge. Now the difference is probably these properties are doing better than some of these hotels.
Oh, and the expectations of the owners or occupants of those buildings is obviously dramatically different than in the past. Now, when the trust factor is established, which, as you have written also there, it's the governance, it is the data, it is how you basically apply the right data in your decision making. What is the role of the individuals in the organization? How do you make sure that across large organizations in particular, that level of people's skills is proper? When does leadership need to intervene to make sure that these things are at the right level that the organization stands for?
True. I mean, let's explore what's governance, right? So, and if governance is putting the right set of practices, right, so that there's a system, so that people can follow the system. Now, how do you get people to follow that system? Is by creating the right set of awareness, right? And bringing them on par of what is expected. Now, at the same time, how do you drive that aspect into the people? In my opinion, it's clarity. If I'm not able to break down complex strategic elements of, let's say, 2026, right, which have happened in a boardroom, and if my ground level operative, my supervisor, who's actually driving those ground level services, because without them, the service is not there. We are a people business. Right? Without people, that cannot be delivered. Yes, today we're talking about robots, we're talking about AI, we're talking about everything.
But it is a people's business.
End of the day, it's a people business.
Yeah.
That strategy, or what needs to be delivered, needs to be broken down to very simple concepts and delivered with clarity downstairs. Right? And that's the most important thing. Sometimes we all get confused, right, in terms of using the right amount of tactics, right, in terms of control. I will use the word control.
Yeah.
Where do we need to control and where do we need to step out?
Yeah.
Right? When it becomes a compliance issue, when it becomes a non-negotiable risk, yes, you need to put in a lot of compliance or control.
Yeah.
Right? Which is depending on the priorities, depending on the risks, right? So if it is not very risky, if it is not going to jeopardize your brand, if you need to give that ability to people to decide, regardless of his designation, regardless of his level, what he has to be doing.
Empowerment and ownership are very close.
Very true.
They are.
So since our operations is very fast and we go through a lot of firefighting on a usual basis, we somehow forget that line. We tend to deviate, and that's very important.
Yeah.
In going back to my earlier statement, so it cannot be an ambiguous accountability. Accountability has to be established, and people should understand that. Yes, I am responsible for this aspect, and I need to deliver. And if I don't, I can always ask.
Yeah.
So having that freedom of expression for people to feel that, yes, I can always go back and ask my leader or manager or supervisor what I need to do.
Do you see that that in particular with topics like sustainability, because if we're using the word wrongly, it's almost like a container type of word. You can fit everything in it, basically. But sustainability is a rather complex ecosystem of different things that you're doing in an organization. How such a complex thing is being educated internally properly so that people on the floor every day feel responsibility for it, accountability even maybe, but feel also energized by some of the initiatives that are being taken. Because I feel often that there is a disconnect between the high-level strategic requirements and this is what we're driving for: energy savings, water savings, this, that, and the other. But on a daily basis, who feels proud?
Very true.
How do you do that in a big organization? Pride.
It's not easy, I would say that. But as you rightly said, if there are strategic goals to achieve, sustainable or sustainability initiatives, it has to be driven top down and bottom up as well. There has to be feedback. A lot of initiatives, I believe, can be brought in by the people because, water sustainability is about 3 Ps: people, planet, and profit. And a lot of ideas does come from these ground operatives because end of the day, they are, operating it day in, day out. And I always say that FM professionals are stalwarts of sustainable initiatives. Because if you want to, because we work with people, right? People are everywhere. It's a social aspect. So you have people who's doing the services, people who are enjoying the services, people who are looking after these services. You have now the element that we need to add in is, are all of them satisfied, right? And how it is contributing to the planet from an environment perspective. Are you generating too much waste, or losing too much energy, or wasting too much water? And how is it benefiting from a profit perspective, from an economy perspective? And to connect all of them is easy and not easy, because the larger the organization, how you communicate that. But it is, again, what we need to understand, that ESG is not something that sits on a paper, not sits on the board, not sits somewhere else in the organization. It should be embedded as part of the operations. It is something that you do in day out, right? Now, only giving trainings once in 3 months and says, oh, we need to do that, we need to save energy, we need to do that, doesn't make sense. But if you start looking at most of our day-to-day methods that most of us use in the FM industry, let's say preventive maintenance. Preventive maintenance is part of sustainability, because we are maintaining the asset to improve the working condition. Let's take an example of an air conditioner, a simple air conditioner. Now, if I do not do the preventive maintenance by cleaning its filters, by looking at all the other parts, if it's worn out or not, and making sure that there's no drain leak and so forth, that itself is part of sustainability, because I'm helping to reduce energy consumption, or rather maintain the energy consumption. If my filters are blocked, it will consume more. The life of the equipment reduces. So
the coil is blocked. Yeah,
absolutely. So there's so many elements when it comes to that's already established in our day-to-day operations, right? Somebody's going into the electrical room, measuring how much energy we consumed, going back to the water meter, in measuring it, writing it out. We have the data. Now, how you analyze this data and how you actually put that into execution in terms of making. So that's where we need an alignment. So if I look into current operations of most of the technical operations, even cleaning operations, we have already implemented quite a lot of elements which already has been part of our behavior onto our day-to-day operations. But now we need to start looking at not only from a reporting perspective, but really from a very strategic aspect, and how we can attack those in a tactical or bring in tactical approach.
Do you think we talk enough about it in the market, the results of all these initiatives that are being taken?
Not much. I still feel there is a lack of transparency. There's a lack of, effective reporting. I'm actually an ESG certified, reporting person as well. And during my coursework, I was reviewing a lot of ESG reports across the world in various industries, not only FM, but generic industries. And I can see that what I've observed is there are few other places who have taken ESG to the next level. And I think so it would be wise for us, since we are a very fast-growing economy, very fast-growing built environment space, to look into it with a more serious approach.
Yeah.
And I go back to my first statement, which I made. There's very limited R&D happening on our front. And that's where we need to really work, bringing those R&D into practice.
But we have good opportunities, though, to do that, even though by making use of platforms like the MEFMA or the IFMA, all these different large communities that, by the way, drive a lot of education and are, I think, also quite open to being the channel through which basically accomplishments can be communicated to the market, the broader market. And because I think at the end of the day, it's also about building authority around a certain topic. Are you being taken seriously when you speak about, I have certain innovations, things can be done differently. Look, here are the results. Basically the step after the R&D phase. This is what we have accomplished. I believe personally that should happen much more than that what is happening today. At a very large level, maybe we see sometimes some data, but nobody really knows what is happening in a building or a community.
True. And I think those things are taking shape for a change. In the next couple of years, I'm very, very optimistic that things will change.
Yeah.
Post the COP28 and UAE being the host and what initiatives has been onboarded, if those ESG reports and other things gets mandated as a regulation, and I'm sure it's coming, and that's what I've been told.
Yeah.
Now, definitely the market will catch up. We are in a growth phase.
Yeah.
We are, from an FM perspective, we're very matured. Definitely organizations like the MEFMA and IFMA and IWFM are doing a lot in various places. I think so. It's just a matter of things catching up speed.
Yeah.
And those larger, the top 10 companies trying to adopt that and publishing it very openly. I mean, obviously, FM companies do have restrictions in when it comes to data publishing, because we have to be very mindful with the client. But if there's a method that's established in terms of what we can reveal and what we cannot, and that starts coming in from a contractual perspective. I've not seen any RFPs or contracts stating them, apart from saying that you have to save 5% of my energy. But if that aspect really is driven from an intellectual perspective, rather than just saying that it's just a line on my contract and you've got to do it for free as a value add, it wouldn't work. It would be, I wouldn't say it wouldn't work, but it rather would be very challenging, because you need the right set of resources, you need the right set of experts to qualify those sort of reports.
Sure.
So it's just a matter of time
Yeah.
that these sort of reports should be in the limelight. I think so. These organizations, as you mentioned earlier, is working on them. But most importantly, it's to bring in the culture. So it's all about driving that cultural change.
Yes.
Because regardless of having 10 seminars to your ground operatives, they're not going to do it unless it's driven by culture. Yeah. And I think so. We're all working very hard to drive that sort of culture.
Yeah.
And have those, especially on the ground, and the supervisors having that accountability of bringing those results.
Yeah. So for you personally, what does it mean to have a green mind?
Again, long term, while I do even sometimes teach sustainability and other aspects with MEFMA and a couple of organizations, so we need to be sensitive of how we utilize this place. If we are not careful in the way we are dealing with things today, we will pay the price for it later on.
Yeah.
Right. So from a PPM angle, if you do not service your car or change the oil and filter and lubricants within a certain period of time, the car will depreciate and you will end up paying a huge price tomorrow. So what you save today, you are anyways going to spend it. You're just deferring the payment to a later date. So that's again being green. So you think about the aspects in terms of the planet, the terms of treating your people right, having that empathetic mind, doing your business ethically, looking after your planet and what you produce and what things you do at the moment, and how it's going to contribute to the future. So if you're able to drive a bit of clarity, I wouldn't say a bit of clarity into your decision making, I presume that is the green method of thinking.
Fahad, thank you very much for this conversation. It was a pleasure.
Same here. Thank you very much, and really, really a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't miss the next big conversation about sustainability. Hit subscribe.